Hello, welcome to the Yaoi Shelf. Grab a seat and relax. If you are video viewing, firstly, I'm sorry, it is 7 a.m. here, but you may notice this podcast is approximately like 50 times more intelligent and more beautiful because we have a special guest with us today. This is a topic Carola and I wanted to talk about. We're talking about fetishization of gay men, and both of us wanted to talk about this, and it always felt a little bit out of our depths. So when we decided that we were going to go and get a guest for it, we swung for whatever sports metaphor you want, and we managed to land an absolute superstar in Dr. Thomas Baudinette. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I think it's been a long time coming in some regards.
It has been. Dr. Thomas and I were on a K-pop and erotica chat a while ago, and I spent that entire chat using every intelligent word I could, hoping to impress you. If you've ever seen like jumping spider, like peacock spiders dance, that was me with like intersectional Orientalism. Like I'm just like using every big word I can. Oh my goodness. But yeah, this has been a long time coming. We're both so excited.
Yes.
We have messaged back and forth like, can we ask academics to sign their books like autographs?
I mean, I think so. To be fair, I remember I got Mark McClelland, who wrote actually one of the first academic papers on boys' love, or yaoi, if you will. I got him to sign a copy of his book when I met him for the first time, which I still keep in my office, which is nice. But so if we're ever in the same space, sure, why not?
Heck yes.
Well, yeah.
So I feel like I could not properly explain the wonder and beauty that is Dr. Thomas. Would you like to tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
I'll do the usual spiel, I guess, like the professional spiel. So I'm Dr. Tom Baudinette. I'm a senior lecturer in Japanese studies and international studies at Macquarie University in Sydney, Australia, where I teach and research into the Japanese studies and Asian studies streams. I'm a cultural anthropologist, so I do research on representations of queer sexuality in the pop culture of East and Southeast Asia. Previously, I've done research on representations of masculinity in gay media in Japan, and this has led me to a broader interest in representations of queer sexuality in the transnational Asian popular culture form known as boys' love. Particularly, my research has been focusing on Thailand. I came to this because I am also a fan. So I've been consuming boys' love since I was 14, I think, was when I first engaged with it. And I'm also a massive keen fan of K-pop, which has led me into the wild world of kind of K-pop idol shipping, which I also research. So, I have too many fingers in too many pies.
Literally both of us.
Likewise.
You are in...
Yeah. You're always telling me to stop fingering pies.
What did I say about being weird in front of Dr.
I already screwed that up before we even started recording. So at this point, I'm just like...
We're just full weird. So, like we said, we figured if we're going to talk about this, that isn't just going to be an hour and a half of us screeching, because that would be this episode without Dr. Tom. It's just an hour and a half of us screeching. We figured let's get someone in who can really talk about this stuff. Which is, again, fetishization of gay men. This is an argument that if you're in the BL, particularly in the yaoi space with pro-ship, anti-ship, and even just further conversations, you've probably seen thrown around a lot. Yeah. It's actually something that I listened back to the old show we've been talking about since episode 1, which was 2 years ago. This is an argument that has popped up recently. It's very zeitgeisty. It's definitely something that we never thought about when we were all coming into yaoi too many years ago. Too long ago. Yeah, when the dinosaurs were still roaming.
Let's not think about time.
No, time doesn't exist. It's fine. I feel like I've been talking about this topic for years, and it just never left up. I'm so tired.
Yeah. So
I feel that in my bones, because I think that in most kind of spaces where I'm, talking about this stuff, whether it be writing for academic journals, teaching it in my classrooms, having conversations with just fans or people who don't know a lot about the subculture, it is something that comes up a lot. And I think it comes up a lot for reasons that I would say aren't necessarily negative ones, because people do have a strong commitment to what I would call good representation, or maybe what we could call good politics. The problem that I have with it is that it generally kind of devolves into a conversation about authenticity, and what is and is not authentic is always a very loaded kind of area of debate. And also in the space around kind of conversations about boys love as a popular culture form that historically emerges out of women's popular culture, but as my research as well as the research of others has kind of concluded is much more broadly consumed across a range of people along the kind of LGBTQ plus ally rainbow, is that there's a lot of misogyny wrapped up also in the kind of fetishization debate. These straight girls going gaga over boys kissing is actually a very misogynistic kind of dismissal of women's desires and exploration of sex. And boys love, historically in Japan, that's where it emerges from. It emerges in the 1970s as a space for women who did not necessarily have space to explore their sexual attraction in a way that was safe. So that's I am kind of sick of it, but at the same time, I understand where the debate comes from, and that's why I'm always willing and able in my scholarship and also these kinds of conversations, as well as my you use the word screeching, and I do that a lot on Twitter, I think.
You do not. You do not.
On Twitter, I do this all the time. Like I will routinely post my little tweet summarizing, this isn't fetishization, or this is like, we need to look at this beyond simple binaristic thinking of bad, good, or simply only thinking about something as queer baiting without considering the kind of context in which it was produced, or the politics of its reception. So yeah, it's something that is debated with good cause, but I am a little bit tired of the debate.
Also, I'd like the record to state, if what you consider what you do is screeching, we're just eldritch, like, guttural noises. Because we read your tweets. It is not screeching. It is.
Look, my screeching is often in my DMs. I will say.
Okay. That I can. I think our screeching is a little bit more like at Discord.
Yeah, but I also enjoyed at FujoCom the panel that you did. That one kind of diverged into a lot of screeching, but that was really fun. I really enjoyed that. It was academic screeching, but it was fun to see that really engaged. Like, not like that.
This was there was the one about K-pop, right?
Yeah. It's all kind of a blur because
everything's a blur for me right now. Yeah.
FujoCon really was a fever dream.
Yeah, it was fun though.
I think I stopped. My brain stopped when we started saying banana fist, and then and everyone found out that I was simping for Shao Tucker from Full Metal Alchemist.
Yeah, that was a new low point in our history.
I am surrounded by Dobby and Overhaul plushies. You don't get to tell me what my low point is. I have an emotional support arsonist.
It's okay. I realized when I got dressed today and I put this shirt on that I look like Vegas. And I'm like, okay, you know what? No.
So
I didn't do it on purpose.
So Dr. Tom brought up a bunch of great points that, again, this is why we brought him in, because you've summarized in a few minutes what we would have probably taken 2.5 hours to half as eloquently say. But that a lot of this is TBH, rooted in misogyny. That this is rooted in a lot of good points, which if you go to the pro-ship, anti-ship episode, we talk about that and some of our angst with that as well. That unfortunately a lot of this stuff is rooted in good points. And that, yeah, no one likes seeing women have fun, but there's also, and I'm so glad you brought this up because, again, pointing back to the Fujin pipeline episode, yaoi and BL is not just consumed by a bunch of cishet women screaming over boys kissing. There are those people there, but increasingly fujin are queer, are trans, are non-binary, are everything.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the things that I always think is important to remember as well, especially when we think about the Japanese context, is that for many, you know, of the initial fans of what was known as shonen ai when it first emerged in the 70s, you know, the attraction to male love or boys love or yaoi or whatever you want to call it was an inkling in themselves for a queerness in their desires that they couldn't articulate in a society in which there was no way to articulate the fact that they may not be straight, if you will. And like, I remember a viral tweet maybe a few weeks or maybe even a month or two ago that was about, like, you know, one of the things that this anti-straight women kind of discourse around you know, BL as fetishization neglects is that for many people who were ostensibly straight women when they got into this, they're not straight women now, and that BL is actually part of that journey. And likewise, it's true of men as well. And even there's a fantastic book who I can't remember who the author is right now, but in Japanese about straight men who read boys love and like engage with it meaningfully. And the fact of the matter is that boys love as a genre is more than just this kind of space in which het girls simp over hot boys fucking. It's so much more than that. I think about the research I've done with gay men in Japan for whom boys love represents a more authentic and accessible image of romance within a gay media culture that is hyper saturated with highly kind of pornographic representations of masculinity and gay male culture. And these Japanese gay men kind of turn to boys love and like that's a very real thing. Likewise, the huge popularity of Thai boys love series across the world is driven very strongly by engagement from same-sex attracted men. And like I just think that it's really problematic if we just lock BL up into this box. I'm constantly saying in my classes, in my I think I may have said this at FujoCon, you know, we need to stop talking about BL as if it's still the 1990s, because the fact of the matter is things have progressed well beyond what happened in the 1990s in Japan. Was the famous what's called the Yaoi Ronso, or the great yaoi debate, in which a gay male activist criticized yaoi as fetishization, and then that became a big issue that was debated over 3 years in this feminist magazine called Choisir. But the fact of the matter is that the boys love industry has responded to that moment and developed, and now you've got like the author of the Cherry Magic manga, like using her manga to kind of talk about same-sex marriage and the need for it to be legalized in Japan. There you go, like hey presto, there's politics in my boys love. The idea that it's just some kind of fantasy wish fulfillment space, not to mention all of the recent kind of politics that we're seeing in Thai BL kind of culture, which I'm constantly, once again, screeching about on Twitter. Like, so like, I think that these are the things that I always like to raise, is that some of these anti-BL stances actually come from a place of remarkable ignorance. They don't understand the genre, they don't understand the history of the genre, and they don't understand the fandom and the ways in which people engage with the fandom and the kinds of fans that are gathered there. And like, it's very frustrating to me how the same sorts of arguments are consistently recirculated without any kind of critical reflection. And this is, kind of boils down into this notion of fetishization, which is a term that I find is used in very problematic ways by people who don't really understand what it is they're talking about.
Yes. No, absolutely. So I kind of refer to it this is a very, very old reference, but I'm like the dog whisperer, when he would go like tss, and like shut the dog down. Like that to me is like what fetishization has become, like with cultural appropriation. Like there's like a bunch of like loaded like SJW terms that now are just like that Caesar Milan, like tss, like you shut down the conversation because now there's no way really to react with it meaningfully. Because even if you do, you're proving the point. I'm using air quotes for listener only. You're brilliant. I'm trying not to simp too hard. It's also very, very...
actually, I mentioned at the start of this conversation my late colleague, Professor Mark McClelland, who unfortunately passed away last year. And he actually, in the latter stage of his research, was working on how, like, scholars of Japanese popular culture, which may have contentious content such as, very problematic depictions of sexualized children, boys' love, etc., and how if you are a scholar of such work, you are often painted as if you are somehow an apologist for that work by mainstream society or by people who think of it as a problem, that you can't talk about these things without being tainted by association. There's almost a chilling effect. Likewise, you cannot advocate for the positivity of boys' love in a space in which boys' love fandom is always already constructed as some kind of ethical problem. And this is my frustration that you raise around this idea of, like, if you use the word you're just a fetishizer, then of course your legitimacy to speak is immediately nullified, because you are part and parcel of the problem that the person is projecting. Now, is all boys' love good representation? No. It's a good representation. Exactly. Like so no media is without its problems. Are all fans are there fans that are delusional and maybe take things too far? Of course there are. But that's true of all fandom, and that's true of all people. The fact of the matter is that most fans, and I'm working on a paper that uses K-pop idol shipping as a space to explore this. And actually, I did speak about this at FujoCon. Is this idea of, like, how fans reflectively and critically engage with these ethical questions, like we are today, is actually really fundamental, because by working through the ethics and sitting there thinking, hang on, can I do this, and how can I do this safely and correctly? What are my limits? That's really the most powerful ethical thing that can be done. And that means that, for some people, they'll work out what is and is not appropriate. And I think that that's much more powerful and useful. I mentioned to you guys off the recording that I work in the porn study space as well. These debates exist around pornography as well.
Absolutely.
Pornography consumed with reflection and critically is much less perhaps problematic than pornography that is consumed and just taken at face value. Of course, that doesn't say that pornography doesn't have problematic representation in politics, because once again it does, but that's because everything potentially can. So this idea of fetishization has just become, academically we call it an empty signifier, a word that is devoid of meaning, but that is used strategically to shut down the conversation in this instance. And it's really quite bizarre, because the actual use of the term fetishization, when it derives from in sociological theory and in the work of Karl Marx, which is where it comes from, is about, like, alienation and being removed from the kind of I don't want to sound too Marxist. Being removed from the use value of something, and this is significant, because if we're actually talking about the true debate that needs to be had, it's not about whether something's fetishization or not. It's about whether things are being consumed critically or not. And my position is that most fans consume critically. And that's certainly been my experience as I've been meeting fans and consumers over many, many, many years is that fans are so invested into what they do that they're going to think about it.
Yes.
That's the point, right? So yeah, this idea that they're somehow like, oh, these stupid girls going gaga over boys, kissing, and like they don't understand that this isn't reality. Bullshit. Of course they know what it is, because they understand that for some it's a fantasy space, and for others it's an opening up to an understanding of a world that they had no idea existed, and then leads them to learn more. That's a good thing.
Yeah, and we talk about this a lot we talk about it a lot, and I talk about it a lot with some of my creator friends who live in more conservative countries where, they can't buy BL manga because they can't import it because it's illegal, and they don't learn about other sexualities and gender orientations and any of those things, but they are picking it up through manga. It's you're still learning, and then it expands from there. So that's such a good point.
Yeah, I've had that experience with research I've been doing in the Philippines for a number of years now. That like BL is this space where like I don't know how many people have told me, including straight women, and I use, for the people listening, not watching the video, I use scare quotes there, like straight women who suddenly found out that they're not so straight because of boys love. Like, and that's
whole episode dedicated to that.
And it's because like there isn't any representation outside of like in mainstream culture, or if there is, it's problematic representation.
Yeah.
Whether it be painting same-sex attracted men, and it's never same-sex attracted women because in these cultures they just don't exist. But same-sex attracted men as dangerous or comedic, or in the gay media that is circulating in that country, it could be hyper masculine, and for some people that's not desirable. I mean, in the Japanese context, I wrote a whole book about the problematic politics of hypermasculinity in Japanese gay culture and the very negative effects it has on people. And boys love within that context is much more queer, if you want to use that word, than the kind of gay media that actually just reinscribes the norms of dominant masculinity. And in that sense, boys love is more powerful in some regards, and like that might be quite a radical thing, and there'll be some people who, as I said, will just dismiss me as, well, he's a fan and that's what he's saying. But this isn't my argument. This is the argument of the people I interviewed, right? So this is the thing that I think is important, that I always want to add, is that there is no like kind of blanket good or bad or yes no. It's not black or white. Nothing is.
No. And I want to echo what you said, because it made me think, when you talk about how there is no representation of queer females in a lot of these spaces, and particularly in the past, I'm thinking about, when they coined the term yuri, the yuri zoku, because the lesbians were reading the gay magazines and they were writing into the columns because there were no spaces for them. They had to go to the male gay spaces in order to find their equals, their peers.
Yeah, and you look at the kind of like some of the biggest names in Japanese boys love scholarship, like Mizuguchi Akiko, who talks about how she became a lesbian through reading boys love, and this has led her to theorize wonderfully how the fujoshi or the fujin can operate as its own sexual orientation outside of the kind of hetero homo binary, which I think is
I love that.
quite a radical kind of way of reading it. That book's in Japanese, but she's currently working on the English version, so soon.
So
she promises. Last time I met with her, she promises that it will be out soon, which is great.
New Sexuality just dropped.
Yeah, New Sexuality just dropped. So there's a bunch of things that I wanted to pinpoint on. My brain is processing at approximately 15% of its normal power because it is 7:35 in the morning.
Thank you for your service.
Anything for Dr. Thomas. That's literally in my planner. It was
That's our motto.
And I'll sleep when I'm dead. But also, one, thank you for liberating small 14-year-old fujin trash me, because I was probably one of those kids that people were pointing at when they say that yaoi is all fetishization. But thinking back on it, yeah, we were always critically engaging with this stuff. We have been critically engaging with this stuff. We did an episode on gravitation, and we ended up, of course, talking
Like the
about,
sun. Yeah.
we ended up, of course, talking about like Yoshiki Kitazawa and how bad trans representation that was. And
Yeah.
we've been saying that, we as a fandom, and then just like me and Carola respectively, we've been saying that for Chet's Notes a decade. That is not a new conversation. That is not a new thought that we had. So thank you for kind of like liberating and helping me, because, doing this podcast has really made me re-look at that younger version of myself. And for a little bit, and this is angst I don't talk about. But
the looking back at the younger self is once again an example of what I'm talking about, is that reflexivity that is central to ethical engagement with this sort of medium. Because one of the things that I'm really quite concerned about, particularly in social justice call-out culture, and I don't want to I'm not saying this as if I'm some kind of right-wing nut job, but what I mean is that...
But if you tried.
I mean, I just quoted Marx. Anyway, but what I mean to say is like, there's this kind of belief is like, if you made a mistake in the past, you'll always be held accountable for it, as if we can't learn or grow. And the fact of the matter is that, I've met through the course of my research people who consuming boys' love didn't necessarily give them the best knowledge of certain things, and like they grew, like they moved on from that, and that like that's the process of critical reflexivity, and that's the process of boys' love as a space of exploration, for playing around with notions of sexuality, but also playing around with notions of who you are, and what you like and where you sit in the world, and like I think that some of the debate which focuses too much on, once again, this notion of authenticity. What is authentic, and authentic to whom? Because one of the arguments that I most dislike, and this comes from my research as well, is the idea that within the context of kind of Japanese popular culture, that boys' love is bad representation because created for and by het girls, versus bara, or what is actually more appropriately referred to as gay komi in Japan, is more appropriate because it's written by and for gay men, neglects two things. One, some of the boys' love manga that are supposedly written by women are written by gay men writing under female pseudonyms, and likewise some of the bara gay komi that is apparently written by gay men is written by women under male pseudonyms. It's just a process of like, that's a norm of the manga industry. Tagame Genkoro, the bara fanboy's favorite example of authentic gay male representation, got his start writing boys' love in June, and like he's never been too anti-BL. He had a little bit of a moment where he kind of seemed that he was going that way, but not anymore.
Got over it.
Yeah, which is partly because he moves in the right circles, and was educated about what he misunderstood because he wasn't necessarily involved, and also he's not an idiot. So, but the thing is that like the argument that bara is good authentic representation versus BL being bad inauthentic representation based on the gender and sexuality of the author neglects the fact that bara is itself a type of fantasy, and isn't necessarily the fantasy held by everyone. In my book, I explore this a little bit with how there are gay men for whom boys' love feels more authentic, but then there are gay men who do prefer bara, and like it's not that one is more correct than the other, and certainly not based on the gender and sexuality of the author, because the most important kind of meaning-making process when it comes to text is the reader, right? So like what the reader brings to the text is much more important, and then trying to police access to kind of representations of queerness based on the identity of the reader is just bizarre to me, because that is the kind of purity culture that queer theory and queer activism has been fighting against for decades. And I am actually, as well as many other scholars, such as in my field, like we're really quite worried about the rise of a kind of purity culture in a new generation of
we are very worried about it.
It's terrifying, actually.
Because like, why are you like, why push back against like everything that queer studies and queer activism fought against? Like, we don't need to reinscribe heteronorms. That's bad neoliberal thinking. And some of this, like, I was quite struck once by an informant of mine in the Philippines mentioning, when we were talking about, gay men dismissing BL as, actually it was K-pop idol shipping, but once again, part and parcel of the same phenomenon. Dismissing it, and she's like, well, actually that's heteronormative backlash. She's like, that's someone trying to police queerness and the queer desires of women, because they're saying that what I do is unethical, partly because they don't want me to ship idols together within a world that is heteronormative, K-pop fandom, but they also want me to explore queerness. And I thought that was quite striking. And I still think that from some perspectives, it's important to note that queer people themselves can be imbricated in heteronormative control. And this purity culture is parcel of that, because it's about realigning queer experience to the kind of heteronormative norms of kind of mainstream society. And hence, I do think of this backlash and this kind of argument of fetishization as kind of limiting desire and limiting in ways that are very much
absolutely. And for me, really being heavily a part of the American convention scene, I see that everywhere. And then conversely, in being LGBTQIA plus in America, in Texas, I'm seeing, I know, I struggle every day. I struggle every day. We're seeing a lot more no kink at Pride. Pride should be a family-friendly event. And I'm like, there were no kids at Stonewall when they were throwing bricks. What are you talking about? And it's there wasn't a toddler with a brick at Stonewall. What do you mean there should be kids at Pride?
I'm in Norway, and we are, we have things that we need to work on. But we are a progressive country. We have a very high level of equality. But we're also seeing this. We're also seeing that there are more and more voices that are being led into the media that are concerned, air quotes, about the children, and pride being taught in schools, and trans ideology, and all of these things, and it's all interconnected. And we're always talking about how this is like, I mean, there's the conservative and the puritanical, that whole movement, but also that people are lacking, lacking queer history, and they're also lacking fandom history. Yes. And we talk about this all the time on this podcast.
Constantly. And I really want to go into a point that, you mentioned that, a lot of us aren't straight anymore, or really were never straight. And I remember having this conversation actually in our Discord, where someone had kind of said, well, why do you guys like yaoi and boys love? Is this fetishizing gay men? Is this fetishization? Are you fetishizers? Which again, firstly want to say how horribly disarming of a comment that is. You've basically just said everything I love is bad. You've looked at my child and said they're ugly and they're horrible. So if you want to authentically engage, which I don't think all of them want to.
No, they don't.
But if you're trying to authentically engage with someone, accusing them of fetishization, chief, it ain't it. And then having to almost painfully go over, well, 1, I'm not straight. 2, I'm not entirely a woman, I'm gender fluid. And 3, one of the big reasons I like boys love is because I've been traumatized by men. And I high-key find a lot of the portrayals of hetero romance to be very triggering and very upsetting, because it's nothing but rape allegories and older men lusting after high schoolers. So, I find a lot of power in boys love, because, again, not straight, not always a woman, and Western media depicting hetero relationships are, checks notes, hot trash.
I think for me, what two things are raised by this anecdote. First of all, is how this claim of you're a fetishizer, or this question, it's a bad faith act, because
Yes.
you can't, like, you're immediately needing to defend yourself.
Yes.
There's no way, like, it forces you into something, and then you need to prove your credentials. So you need to list out that I am XYZ, as opposed to just saying this is something I enjoy and get meaning from.
Right.
And like my flip side to this argument, whenever students raise this in my classes, so I teach BL in my classes, and like a student will always inevitably bring it up, like, and then I would ask them, do gay men fetishize straight couples when they watch a rom-com? And there's like, no. And I'm like, so why not? Why? What if that rom-com was written by and directed by a gay actor, like a gay director? Is that fetishization? Why is it, like, you know? So once again, like, I want to flag that I understand that the debates come from a good place. They come from a concern with the fact that historically media has not necessarily represented same-sex attracted men in the best light. Two, boys love as a genre, you mentioned rape allegories. I mean, boys love has the very problematic trope of rape me until I love you. But they get
so much.
But they
So
get
much.
that from romance fiction. That's where that comes from.
Thank you.
Yes, it's not unique to boys love. It's actually it's part and parcel of a tendency that exists, particularly within shoujo manga culture.
Thank you.
Of like rape as a kind of dark fantasy, and it's explored and historicized wonderfully by my colleague Mori Naoko in this fantastic book in Japanese called Ona wa porno o yomu, which means women read porn. Like, it is basically it's this kind of idea that by depicting a forbidden act, it releases the tensions that women experience living within a patriarchal world. You can actually control kind of misogyny and transform it into a space of play. I mean, if I want to use another example, this is the whole 50 Shades of Grey phenomenon. No, that's a terrible book, but it's the same sort of thing.
No, it is.
The thing is that, like, boys love has this tendency in it with, like, historical roots, right? There's a reason. But the other thing is that the argument that boys love is fetishization, look at all the rape. There's lots of rape in gay porn. There's lots of rape in gay erotica, especially Japanese gay erotic manga. It's extraordinarily rapey. So once again, this idea that it's inauthentic because of the rape fantasies collapses if we look at it historically. So this idea of, like, needing to historicize is part and parcel, once again, of that broader critical engagement. So if fetishization, I guess we can loosely define as consuming something without engaging with it critically, then yes, that's a problem. But I don't believe that most people are engaging critically or acritically, sorry. But I think that the thing that people forget is that it's a journey. You develop your consumption over time. And yeah, these people who ask, like, are you a fetishizer then? Like, that's like they've already made their judgment. You're not going to be able to convince them.
Yeah, there's no way to be able to defend against that meaningfully. And it's frustrating because, it does also feel like, and I see this a lot, and I'd love to get your input on this, it does sometimes feel like a bit of a no true Scotsman fallacy a little bit, where I especially see it coming from gay men lobbed at people they perceive to be women, or at women, sort of like almost like a girl boss gatekeep thing. That it's like, we should keep you dirty women out of our BL fort because this is ours. This is for us. You go read, I don't know, whatever girls read. It does feel like certain, that like some gay men now are building like these like elaborate pillow forts and now saying like, you dirty girls, you get out of our boys' love. You've had it for too long.
Mm-mm.
And going back to your point about misogyny, it really does feel like that because, if you went back, yes, there was this argument years ago, but we weren't saying this at 14. We didn't have anyone on LiveJournal or Zanga or DeviantArt saying, "Are you a fetishizer?" We'd say, "Yeah, of course we are," and not know what that means.
We didn't know that word when we were 14.
We did not.
The scary thing is that a 14-year-old now they'd know the word, they just wouldn't know what it means. So this idea of like how this kind of debate links into misogyny, I think is really important. Partly because when I mentioned the yaoi ronso, like that emerged in that feminist magazine, the activist who initially began the ronso around the fetishization of boys' love, his name was Sato Masaki, and some of the people who wrote back to him, including fans and feminists and so forth, they responded by saying that actually there's misogyny in some of your assumptions here, though there were many people who also took to heart the central criticism that he had of the fact that the couple, like the depiction of couples in boys' love, are not necessarily representative of real lived experience, and that boys' love as a genre at that moment in time didn't necessarily engage with political questions, which is not quite true. But at that time, the Japanese gay rights movement was really kind of heating up. So when he said not engaging in politics, he meant kind of Euro-American style, like identity politics, rather than addressing questions of discrimination and so forth creatively through art, how art can be radical, as boys' love was. So I think that this is the thing for me, is that nowadays I very much do believe that there's a strong misogyny involved in this, and that it is a gatekeeping activity. And my colleague and I, who works at Ateneo de Manila University, her name is Kirsten Santos. She and I are working on a paper exploring the misogynistic backlash against BL in the Philippines, particularly amongst kind of gay male commentators and creators and those working within the media industry, because there was a pervasive discourse that emerged in 2020, which is when Pinoy BL became a thing in reaction to the massive popularity of the Thai boys' love series Together, Pro Rao Kugan. And there was this discourse of, as gay male creators, we will fix boys' love and make it more real.
We'll make it great again.
Yeah, and
God.
What they meant by that was it was no longer boys' love. So the best Pinoy BL series, such as, for example, Game Boys, the series, and Gaya sa Pelikula, even though Gaya sa Pelikula has a very problematic author, but we'll just set that aside, actually were successful because they embraced what boys' love could do, right? And used the norms of the genre. Now, the norms of the genre that they have learnt through Thai examples, which had already fiddled with the golden noble path of the Japanese manga a little bit, but nevertheless, they didn't try and fix BL. So now you have all these gay male creators or queer women who write Western cartoons that get turned into Netflix series, saying that they're fixing the genre.
I wasn't going to mention it, but
I wasn't going to say jack or shit.
On Twitter about Heartstopper and my annoyance with it. Look, cute show. Is it revolutionary? No. Asia's been doing this for 30 years.
This whole episode, like, the series is over. There's no more Yaoi Shelf after this. You solved all the problems.
Thank you.
Like, there's no way now. Like, we're gonna do Carola's anniversary episode. Series is over. Like, we're done. You literally covered all the points. Because you're right. Like, and that's something, that me, especially as an American fujin, that I have been dealing a lot with, is that, not to say that Carola does not experience fan issues, but it is a little different here.
Yeah, it is.
In the US, it's a smidgen different. Where
Worse.
we see this. different,
Yeah.
where we see this stuff a lot. And then again, you get this no true Scotsman fallacy from people who aren't even from Japan.
Yeah.
You're seeing it increasingly from, I mean, and not just, like cis het white women like Tumblr, but like from, people that should be with us, that are on the other side of the table. Because at least for the longest time, because we just talked about identity politics and Tumblr in our last episode, where at least when it was, the cis het white female activist who was talking over black and brown people and queer people, that was a perceived enemy that we could all rally against. Now it's people that should be with us. It's gay men, it's trans men, it's pro-ship, anti-ship bullshit that, again, has some very valid points that we should talk about, that no one's talking about. Instead, we're just going to dox women for liking fictional characters.
So this is the thing that frustrates me about the way the debate is playing out, particularly on social media right now, is that it isn't turning into a space of conversation. It's turning into a space of screaming at each other, or more the point, one group of people screaming at another group of people who have to defend themselves. And it is very aggressive, and it is like, if my central argument that I've been sharing with you guys tonight my time, obviously morning your time, is that if we're all able to talk things through and reflect, then it allows us to actually come to terms with the ethics and come to terms with the potential problems. So the fact that there are problematic representations of male-male couples in some manga, or the fact that there is sexualized representations of minors in some Japanese popular culture forms, or that there are questions over what it means to ship a real person with another real person. Like, if we can sit there and ethically debate that and determine what is and is not okay for us, and then how we will express it in ways that are safe and cause no harm, then surely we should be allowed to enjoy whatever it is that we are consuming, as long as it is meaningful to us and produces something. The idea that, like, the only harm that can be done, as far as I'm concerned, is harm that is done without thought. And like, that includes, for instance, for me, like, I would say that, like, sexualized representations of children are always wrong, because the only people who are going to do that are the kinds of people who haven't thought about the ethics of doing so. So if you think about the ethics of doing so, you will inevitably come to the conclusion that it is incorrect, like that it is wrong because it causes harm. Right? So this is I think the point is that ethical reflection is fundamental. And if there is only going to be, like, a useful debate is not, are you fetishizing this, is how much have you thought about this and where do you stand? And then the other thing that needs to happen is that people need to be expansive and accepting of opinions and experiences and value systems that are different to theirs. And that's the sticking point.
That is 100%.
People aren't necessarily willing or able to do that. So I guess, in many ways, I've spoken in quite fancy, expansive terms that can boil down into the phrase, one that I like to use all the time: never yuck someone's yum. And like, I think that's a word, a thing to live by. As long as there's no harm being caused, and I'm talking about real harm, not perceived harm, then it should be okay.
Thank you. Okay. So you're brilliant. You're brilliant. Simping intensifies. Perceived versus real harm. Thank you. And there's two things that I want to mention about that. Carola gets excited whenever I mention this, but, like, old Fujin culture was all naval combat. It was boats. And, like, that's literally all we did. Is, if someone was really, really into Uchiha Cest and you weren't, you let them be on that boat. That's their boat. And, you just paddled on. You kept going. It's like, okay, that's their boat. we're not going to talk about that boat, but that's their boat.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the old like LiveJournal fan fiction kind of disclaimer, which has become almost like a joke now. Is like don't read.
Yeah.
The thing is, that was the attitude that everyone had.
It really was.
And like the whole idea of, for example, AO3's tagging system, which people don't seem to understand, is that you use it so you don't engage with the things that you don't like.
It's not a billboard.
Yeah.
Like no, we've gone over. It's like I'm the person who reads "Dead Dove Do Not Eat," and I open the bag,
and then you regret it.
And then I regret it. But I'm not.
You know what
yelling.
you're getting into.
Yes.
But I'm not yelling at the creator.
To do it.
Exactly. But I'm not yelling at the creator. I'm not threatening the creator. I'm not doing any of those things. I'm the one that saw the bag that said "Dead Dove Do Not Eat," and I still opened the fucking bag. That's on me.
Yeah.
That's not on the creator. The creator warned me. The creator said there's a dead dove in this bag.
Yeah.
And you were like...
And I was like, YOLO. Opened the bag.
This is like, the question is, it's dead, yes, but how dead?
I
want to know.
And,
I'm morbidly curious. I need to...
Exactly. And I think the other thing that I was really, really interested about you saying was the perceived versus real harm. And really, like, that could be a whole other episode. It's I struggle to where we stopped seeing fiction as fiction, because you're right. I totally agree with you. Is there, that reminded me of the other point I want to bring up, but I want to touch base and say to all of our listeners, perceived versus real harm. Where I did want to mention is, again, where I come at, as a Western fan, and Carola probably has this a little bit as well. Not to say that you aren't Western, wherever your country is situated on the map. Too close to Russia.
I'm sorry. Well, Sweden and Finland are in between, so we're doing good.
Oh, you have some cushion. Okay.
Except the north, but we don't talk about that.
But that we're really only seeing this with BL and Yaoi, where there are still straight women who will read like gay erotica Omegaverse stuff, and no one's yelling at them. And really, they should be yelled at. Some of them should be yelled at. But it's fujin. It's people like me and Carola who are getting fussed at when 50 Shades of Grey exists, when there's too many fucking Omegaverse novels written by horny housewives.
And again, that age-old argument of you're not calling a crime fiction writer a murderer, so why is anyone writing gay fiction or BL a target? Why are we automatically encouraging and perpetuating whatever it is we're enjoying?
I think for one thing, when it comes to talking about the Japanese kind of expression of BL, from which many of this all falls out, I think, is that it also ties into that broader weird Japan discourse. Japan is always already dangerous, sexually deviant and wrong and other, and hence any kind of and also the idea that anime and manga is this kind of perverse world of like tentacle rape and so forth, and that if it comes out of the Japanese popular culture machine, then it must automatically be tainted by the evils of the quote-unquote land of child pornography, as it has been called by the Guardian newspaper and CNN, right? So, like, this is like another element that is relevant to this discussion, is this idea that anything that there can be no authentic, good representation coming out of a place like Japan, because only like the global north, the West, has a monopoly on good representation because it is the space in which quote unquote queer rights have been most progressed, and that is nonsense. Especially like I don't think any, and I apologize profusely, but I don't think any American has any leg to stand on right now to argue around the progressiveness of the American society, because it's basically going to hell with a democratic president in charge.
Okay,
Right?
listen, none of us are happy about this. He was literally the only choice versus a fascist.
Yes, I
And
know.
the fascists packed the Supreme Court, and now we have a bunch of terrible people that will be here until they die. My vote is sinkhole 2024. We just need a sinkhole to open up, and everyone goes away, and we can do everything right again. Sinkhole 2024.
You can flee here. Come here.
Very expensive to abandon nationality. Like, it's thousands of dollars to stop being an American. But so I love where you're going. But so here's something that I've seen a lot of is the call is coming from inside of the house. So yes, it has been that where, you know, I remember having to defend BL and Yaoi from my aunts who were reading Zane novels, you know, because that's not porn. Zane isn't porn. No, but me and my Asian backwards boys kissing books are bad. But for a lot of fujin, the call is coming from inside the house. It's again the pillow fort. It's here's this thing that really, again, especially in Western culture, has been fueled by women. It is women that have the money. It is women who are doing the fan works. It is women who are doing the dojins. It is women who are doing the work. And then suddenly, you know, 3 or 4 years ago, the gay men have decided, thank you for building the foundation of this house. You leave. There was a comic that I saw that was related to kink at Pride, and it was this bear standing there. It was called Kink, and then there was a forest, and then the forest got cut down, and the bear is still there. A house gets built, the bear is still there. Someone comes out of the house, and the house is labeled Pride. It's like, oh no, Kink is at Pride, and it's like the bear's been there. The bear's been there this whole time. You cut down the forest, and now you're shocked the bear is there. That's kind of what it feels like with women a little bit, and people who really aren't women, because again, we're not all women.
Exactly.
But it's like, we built this house. We built the pillow fort, and now you're like poking us with a stick, telling us to leave because we're fetishizers now.
Yes, I mean, and this is I feel like we're almost rehashing the same arguments now. Like it's a lack of history. Like they just don't understand where things come from, and it's patriarchy. So it's like, well, men like claim to a space because men feel entitled to that space. Yeah. And women get chucked out of that space because they aren't supposed to be in male-controlled spaces in ways that shake the male control. So I think that one of the things that might be happening is partly a sense of almost threat on behalf of these very, very kind of rigid, puritanical, gay white men who don't want their neoliberal worlds to be rocked by anything that might be, you know, challenging. This is we're living in the era of you know, seat of the tableism is like I think about it, is that concession politics. We need to tidy the place up to make it look neat and clean so that we can be thrown the bone. Like, but I've always said, along with the most radical queer theorists, it's like, we don't want a seat at the table. We want to fucking destroy the table because the table has excluded us for all of time. Why would we want to sit at the table which has disadvantaged us? And this is what really like concerns me. And like, I take your point that like these are arguments with people who should be allies, and it's a lack of consciousness, I think. A lack of consciousness amongst people who have had it. I don't want to like shame the younger generations or anything, but like it's a lack of responsibility. It's a lack of consciousness of the struggles that other people have been through, and it's a lack of historical consciousness, and it's a lack of the hard battles that have been fought to get to where we are. And like that's why the complacency that we're seeing is now leading, for example, in the States, to the erosion of rights. And like, yes, it may seem like a really, really quite large bow to draw between, you know, fetishization debate over comic culture from Japan versus the overturning of Roe v. Wade. But the fact of the matter is it's part of a broader global trend in which we are seeing the gains founded and fought through radical activism being rolled back as people are being imbricated into a neoliberal machine that is designed to remove any sense of any sense of difference that may change the status quo. And that's what really makes me sad when I see these debates. Like, rather than using it as an opportunity to open our minds and enter into these critically reflective ethical debates that I think is truly expansive, we're seeing an almost fascist backlash in which people are being forced to think in particular ways because there is only one way that is right, and the one way that is right is a remarkably mainstream status quo conservative vision of this is what everyone is supposed to do to live in a productive, safe society. And that's like, it's once again putting on my porn studies hat. It was like when we saw the kind of unholy alliance between extreme right-wing Christians and feminist activists at the end of the 80s, and when they joined together in the States to rail against pornography. Those people should have been enemies, and yet they worked together. Likewise, we're seeing the same thing beginning to happen here. And it's the rise of turfdom. It's the rise of this kind of really restrictive, binaristic way of thinking. And I use the word fascist not in its political sense, but in its more philosophical sense of like enforcing a kind of corporatist one-minded mentality that does not allow any deviation. And like, this is it's really shocking to me how people are getting brought into this. And the thing that really makes me sad is that it is resuscitating debates that have been worked through already and stuck in a perpetual cycle. It's like, to go back to the start of what we were talking about an hour ago, like, as I am sick of having this conversation in some regards, as much as it fuels my research, because I feel like I'm screaming into the void. And like, no matter how many papers I write, no matter how many like kind of podcasts I join, no matter how many times I talk about this stuff, I always seem to get but I feel this way and you're wrong, and like, you're clearly an apologist and blah. I mean,
I don't know what else to do. I've got to wrap up this episode because you've just eloquently like summed up everything that we could have said in 2 hours of screeching.
And then some.
Again, I'm trying to keep like the simp level low. The espresso finally kicked in. I'm trying to keep
I think my kind of caffeine is beginning to wear off.
Don't worry, we're wrapping up. You said now, or I'm going to do my best.
We're going to let you go to bed.
Yeah, we're going to let you go to bed. I will say very briefly, this is funny because when we were figuring out time differences, because time differences are weird, there were two people that were going to inevitably lose, and one person that was going to be okay. And in this instance, the two people that lose are me and Dr. Tom, and Carola sitting pretty at like 3 p.m.
It actually is 3 p.m.
So thank you from the bottom of our rotten fujin hearts for being here.
No, thank you for having me. I mean, I say that I'm tired of saying this, but at the same time, I do feel very passionately about all of this. Yeah. So of course I'm going to talk about it whenever I can.
And, again, we appreciate you saying all this stuff with eloquence, because, again, if we had done this on our own, just 2 hours of screeching.
It is, I guess, literally my job.
That is a great job to have.
It's such a cool job.
If you would like to receive more content like this and help us pay for nice gifts for our nice guests, because you will get your customary gift basket.
Ooh.
You can help support us at patreon.com/the Yaoi Shelf. Dr. Tom, is there any particular project that you'd like to pitch, tell us about?
So I guess I should probably, I've been talking about my book, so I may as well just do look, here's a copy I had.
Yes.
How convenient.
So this is my book.
How convenient.
Yeah, so here's one I prepared earlier. So this is my book, Regimes of Desire, Young Gay Men, Media and Masculinity in Tokyo. You can get a copy of it if you're interested. from either the publisher, University of Michigan Press, but it's also available in all good bookstores, online or otherwise. Also, next year, I have a new book coming out from Bloomsbury Academic called Boys Love Media in Thailand, Celebrity Fans and Transnational Asian Popular Culture, in which a lot of what we've been talking about is written about much more thoroughly than in this book, where I think it's only about 10 pages is about boys love. But it is there.
Yeah, we will throw in all necessary links and descriptions below. We are all over social media at the Yaoi Shelf, including Instagram, Twitter, and we do have a Discord. Next month, it is Carola's 1-year anniversary. I let this gremlin in the house 1 year ago, and she refuses to leave. And she has decided that we're going to talk about
rare pairs.
She just wants to talk about Mirio and Tamaki from My Hero Academia.
I'm gonna try to dig up some other rare pairs of mine, but at the moment it's like I can only think about them. I love them so much.
She's not gonna try. So we will see you in a couple of weeks for our Patreon episode, and in a few more weeks for our live stream, in which we will try to be as eloquent and charming as Dr. Tom is.
We will try.
We will try very hard. Thank you all so much for being here. We will see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.